My name is Vince Hale. I'm a former Marine, a bar owner, and until recently, a man who thought he had everything figured out. I built my life on trust, on loyalty, on the belief that the people closest to me would always have my back. My best friend Jason and I went through hell together in the service, and when we got out, we swore nothing would break that bond. My wife Emily was the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. The one person who made coming home feel like it actually meant something. For years, I believed in them, I believed in us. But that was before the late nights, the excuses, the subtle shifts that I tried to ignore, before I found a message on a phone that wasn't mine, before I realized that the people I trusted most had been betraying me in ways I never saw coming. I could have confronted them. I could have lashed out. But that's not the kind of man I am. I don't get mad, I get even. And I was about to show them just how much damage a patient man can do. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. My name is Vince Hale, and I never thought I'd be the kind of man telling a story like this. But life doesn't care what you think. It drags you where it wants, whether you're ready or not. I spent most of my life being the kind of man people could count on. The Marine Corps teaches you discipline, loyalty, and most of all, trust. Out there, you don't survive without the guy next to you watching your back. And Jason, he wasn't just another soldier, he was my brother. We met in training, got stationed together, and fought side by side more times than I can count. We saw things no one should have to see, did things we don't talk about, and survived when plenty of good men didn't. And when we finally got out, we swore we'd always have each other's backs, no matter what. Civilians don't understand that kind of bond. They think friendship is just about growing up in the same town or liking the same football team. But when you've pulled a man out of the dirt while bullets are flying, when you've carried each other through hell and back, it's deeper than that. It's unbreakable. Or at least, that's what I thought. I didn't come from money. Didn't have a family business waiting for me or a college degree to fall back on. I had my fists, my instincts, and a work ethic drilled into me by years of hard living. When I got out, I wanted to build something of my own, something solid. That's why I opened the bar. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, a place for guys like me. Guys who had seen too much, who needed a drink and a place where no one would ask too many questions. I worked my ass off to make it a success, and when it started taking off, Jason was the first person I called. I needed someone I could trust, someone who understood me, and there was no one better than him. He came on as my manager, and just like in the service, we had each other's backs. We built the place up together, it was good. It felt like we'd finally found something stable after years of chaos. And then there was Emily, my wife, the love of my life. I met her when I was still trying to figure out how to be a civilian again. It wasn't easy. I was rough around the edges, short-tempered, restless. But she saw past all that. She was patient in a way that no one else had ever been with me. She made me feel like I was more than just a soldier who made it home by luck. She made me feel like I had a future. I married her because I couldn't imagine my life without her. 7 years, that's how long we were together. And I never once doubted that she was mine, never once questioned her love, her loyalty. Some guys start taking their wives for granted after a while, but not me. I woke up every morning knowing exactly how lucky I was. She was beautiful, sharp, full of life. She made people want to be around her. And I felt proud every time we walked into a room together, knowing she was my wife. So when things started feeling different, I ignored it. At first it was nothing, just little things. Emily started working late more often. She had always been dedicated to her job in marketing, but suddenly there were last-minute meetings, urgent deadlines, late-night calls. She'd come home tired, distracted. I told myself it was just work. People get busy, life gets stressful. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who questioned everything. I trusted her. But then Jason started acting different too. He was at the bar less, always had some excuse when I asked if he wanted to grab a drink after closing. That wasn't like him. Jason was always up for a beer, always had my back. But suddenly he was distant. I pushed it away, told myself I was imagining things. Then came the perfume. Emily always wore a soft vanilla scent. I bought it for her on our anniversary and I loved how it smelled on her. But one night she came home wearing something different, something heavier, muskier. It threw me off. I asked about it, made a joke, and she laughed it off, said a co-worker had given her a sample to try. It didn't sit right with me, but I let it go. Then there was the way she used her phone. Emily had never been secretive before, but now she tilted the screen away from me whenever she texted. If I walked into the room, she'd put it face down or slip it into her pocket. I told myself it was nothing. People get more private as they get older, right? But then I got the text. A random number, no name attached, just one line. "You blind, Vince? Open your eyes." I stared at it for a long time. It had to be a mistake, a wrong number, someone playing a joke, but it got under my skin. I tried to push it away, but once doubt creeps in, it doesn't leave. That night, I watched Emily a little closer. I noticed the way she hesitated before answering my questions, like she was filtering every word. I noticed how Jason, my best friend, suddenly couldn't meet my eyes when we talked. Then, the moment that shattered everything. It was a slow night at the bar. Jason had already left early, saying he had things to do. I was cleaning up, wiping down the counter, when I saw it sitting near the register. A phone. At first, I thought maybe a customer had left it behind, but when I picked it up, the screen lit up with a new message. Same time after closing, Vince has no clue. No name, no explanation. Just that. And the phone wasn't a customer's. It was Jason's. I stood there holding Jason's phone, my pulse steady, my breath even, but inside, something cold settled into my gut. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones, the kind you don't shake off. The words on the screen burned into my mind. Same time after closing, Vince has no clue. I stared at it, waiting for something, maybe for the words to change, maybe for the universe to tell me I was wrong, but the screen just dimmed, fading into black, leaving me alone with a truth I hadn't been ready to face. I put the phone down exactly where I found it and stepped back. My first instinct, the one drilled into me through years of training, was to act, to confront, to demand answers. But I didn't. Because this wasn't a battlefield and I wasn't going to charge in blind. I had spent years learning patience, discipline, the art of waiting for the right moment. This was no different. I wasn't about to make a scene, not without proof, not without understanding exactly how deep this went. That night, I went home like nothing had happened. Emily was already in bed, curled up under the blankets, her breathing slow and steady. I stood in the doorway, watching her, waiting to feel something, anger, sadness, betrayal. But all I felt was distance, like I was looking at a stranger. I lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling, my mind working through every possibility. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew. The next day, I started paying attention. I watched the way Emily moved around the house, the way she smiled at me, the way she kissed me goodbye in the morning. Everything felt calculated, like she was playing a role. I thought back to all the nights she came home late, the perfume that wasn't hers, the way she angled her phone away from me, and Jason, his excuses, his sudden distance, the way he had started treating me like I was just another guy instead of the brother who had saved his life. I didn't say anything. Instead, I made a plan. I started with the cameras. The bar had security footage, but the office didn't. That was a mistake I corrected immediately. I installed a small, hidden camera inside, angled perfectly at my desk. If Jason and Emily were using my office as their meeting place, I'd have it on video. Then I checked the bar's financials. Jason handled a lot of the day-to-day transactions, and I trusted him with the books. But trust is a funny thing. It only works when it's not being abused. I went through the numbers, checking the deposits, the invoices, the outgoing payments. It didn't take long to find the discrepancies. Money was missing, small amounts, spread out over months, just enough that I wouldn't notice unless I was looking for it. Jason had been skimming from me. I kept my routine the same. I joked with Jason at work, acted like nothing had changed. I kissed Emily when I came home, listened to her talk about her day, nodded in all the right places. I played my part, just like they were playing theirs. But every night, when I lay down next to her, I felt the space between us grow wider. A week passed, then 2. The camera in my office recorded everything. I didn't watch the footage right away. I wanted to give it time, make sure I had enough before I faced the truth. But eventually I sat down in the back room of the bar, locked the door, and pressed play. There was no denying it now. The video showed Emily slipping into my office after closing, Jason following her a few minutes later. No hesitation, no guilt, just 2 people who had done this before. He kissed her like he owned her. She let him. My office, my space, the place I built with my own hands, and they used it like it was nothing. I sat there watching, my fists clenched, my jaw locked, but I didn't move. I didn't stop the video. I made myself watch every second, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because I needed to see them for who they really were. When the screen finally went dark, I sat in silence, breathing slow and steady. I wasn't going to lose control. I wasn't going to break anything. I wasn't going to storm out and confront them. That's not how you win a war. You win by being smarter, by knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. So I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and started planning exactly how I was going to destroy them. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, listening to Emily breathe, knowing exactly where she had been just hours before. I could still see it in my mind, Jason's hands on her, the way she melted into him, the way they laughed like nothing about it was wrong. I thought about turning over, waking her up, telling her I knew, but what was the point? She would deny it. She would lie. She would look me in the eyes and swear that nothing was going on, and I would have to pretend to believe her. No, I wasn't going to give her that chance. I wasn't going to give either of them an easy way out. The next morning, I got up like usual. I kissed Emily on the forehead, told her I'd see her later, and left for the bar. Jason was already there, pouring himself a coffee like he owned the place. He grinned when he saw me, same easy smile as always, like we were still just 2 old friends running a business together. I forced myself to smile back, made a joke about him looking like hell, and he laughed. He had no idea, none at all. That was the moment I knew I was making the right choice. He didn't deserve my anger, not yet. He deserved something much worse. Over the next few days, I set the final pieces of my plan in motion. First, I went to my lawyer. I told him I wanted to quietly start separating my finances from Emily's. No sudden moves, nothing that would make her suspicious. Just enough to make sure that when the time came, she wouldn't get a damn thing from me. Then I called my accountant and had him go over every transaction Jason had handled in the last 6 months. The missing money wasn't just a few hundred here and there, it was thousands. He had been stealing from me for months, probably longer. I made sure to document everything. I wanted proof. Then came the final step. I needed to catch them together, in real time, in a way neither of them could deny. The camera footage was enough for me, but it wasn't enough for what I had in mind, so I set the trap. I told Jason I'd be heading out of town for a couple of days to meet with a distributor. I made sure Emily overheard. I even packed a bag, left it sitting by the front door so she could see it. Then, instead of leaving, I waited. That night, as soon as the bar closed, I parked down the street and watched. Jason's car was already there. A few minutes later, Emily pulled up. I could have walked in right then. I could have ended it. But I wasn't interested in a confrontation. I wanted a reckoning. So instead, I waited, letting them get comfortable, letting them believe they were safe. Then I pulled out my phone and activated the live stream. Every screen in the bar flickered to life, playing the live feed from my office. The security cameras I had installed showed everything. The way Emily leaned into Jason, the way he touched her like he had every right to. Every customer in the bar saw it, every regular, every stranger. The silence was deafening. Then came the whispers, the murmurs of disbelief, the laughter from a few drunk patrons who thought it was some kind of sick joke. But it wasn't a joke, it was the truth, and there was no escaping it. I waited a few minutes before walking in. When I did, the room fell silent. Jason and Emily were still in the office, unaware that their little secret was no longer a secret at all. I walked through the bar, past the stunned faces, past the people who had known me for years but had never seen me like this. I pushed open the office door, and there they were. Jason's face went pale the second he saw me. Emily turned, confusion flashing across her face, then panic as she realized why I was there. Neither of them spoke. What could they say? The evidence was right there. I could see the exact moment it hit them, the exact second they understood that everything was over. I didn't yell. I didn't throw punches. I just looked at them and smiled. "Looks like the whole bar knows what you've been up to," I said. And then I walked out. I walked out of that office, past the bar full of people still processing what they had just seen, and stepped outside into the cold night air. The moment I had been building toward for weeks had finally arrived, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no rage, just a quiet, eerie calm. I had expected something, maybe a weight lifting off my shoulders, maybe some kind of release. But all I had was the knowledge that this was far from over. Jason and Emily weren't just going to stand there in silence forever. They would come after me, try to explain, try to beg, and I wasn't interested in a single word either of them had to say. I didn't go home. I didn't want to see Emily gathering her things. Didn't want to hear her sob stories, her desperate attempts to twist this into something salvageable. So instead, I drove. Nowhere in particular, just letting the road stretch ahead of me, letting the weight of everything settle into my bones. My phone buzzed over and over. Calls, texts, all from her. I didn't answer. She could stew in it. Let her sit with what she had done. Let her wonder if there was even the smallest chance of forgiveness. Eventually, I pulled into a parking lot overlooking the city and just sat there. I could see the skyline glowing in the distance, the world moving on like nothing had happened. That was the part that always got me about betrayal. Your world crumbles, but outside of your little bubble, nothing changes. People still go to work, still laugh with their families, still live their lives, without knowing that somewhere out there, a man is sitting in his truck staring at the lights, wondering how everything went to hell so fast. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Emily. It was Mike, one of my bartenders. I picked up. "Boss," he said, his voice hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he should even be calling. "You need to get back here." I exhaled slowly, already knowing what was coming. "It's Jason." "And Emily. They're making a scene." Of course they were. I gritted my teeth, gripping the steering wheel before forcing myself to let go. "I'll be there in 10. By the time I pulled up, there was already a small crowd outside. Some were regulars, others just people drawn in by the commotion. I stepped out of the truck, and the second my boots hit the pavement, I heard her voice. "Vince!" Emily was standing just outside the entrance, her face red, her hair a mess, eyes wide and desperate. She took a step toward me, but I held up a hand. "Don't." She froze, her breath hitching. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain?" I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "Explain what, Emily? That you've been sneaking around with my best friend? That the two of you thought I was too stupid to figure it out?" I gestured toward the bar. "Because I think the whole damn city got the message loud and clear." Her lip trembled, and for a split second I saw something that almost resembled genuine regret. Almost. But I had spent too long being fooled, not anymore. "Vince, man, just calm down," Jason's voice cut in. And that was when I really felt it. An emotion I had kept buried finally clawing its way to the surface. Not sadness, not disappointment. Rage. I turned to face him. He had the audacity to look annoyed, as if I was the one causing problems. As if he wasn't the one who had spent months screwing my wife behind my back. His hands were up in some half-assed attempt to pacify me, but I wasn't in the mood to be calmed down. "You have 5 seconds," I said, my voice low, steady. 5 seconds to get the hell out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret. Jason scoffed, shaking his head like I was being unreasonable. "Come on, man, don't be like this. It's not like you and Emily were doing great. You barely even talked about her. I mean, what did you expect?" I stepped forward before I even realized I was moving, but before I could close the distance, strong arms wrapped around me, pulling me back. Mike and another bartender, pulling me away before I did something that would land me in jail. Jason smirked, taking a step back. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Mike's grip on me tightened. "Not here, boss. Not like this." And he was right. Jason wanted a fight. He wanted me to swing, to throw the first punch, to give him something to play the victim about. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Instead, I took a deep breath, rolled my shoulders back, and looked Jason dead in the eye. "You think this is over?" My voice was quiet, but the promise behind it was clear. "You have no idea what's coming." And with that, I turned and walked back to my truck. I could still hear Emily calling my name, still hear Jason muttering something under his breath, but it didn't matter. I had bigger plans. Plans that neither of them were going to see coming. I drove away without looking back. My hands were tight on the wheel, my jaw locked so hard it ached. My whole body was screaming for release, for action, for violence, for something to make the rage inside me stop burning. But I wasn't going to throw a punch, not yet. Jason wanted that. He wanted me to lose control, to make a mistake, to let my emotions take over so he could spin the narrative. That wasn't going to happen. I wasn't just going to react, I was going to end this on my terms. That night, I didn't go home. I wasn't ready to face Emily, to see her sitting there, waiting for me, eyes red, rehearsing whatever pathetic excuse she had come up with. I knew exactly how it would go. She'd try to cry, try to reach for me, tell me she had made a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that she loved me, and then, when she realized that wasn't working, she'd turn angry. She'd blame me, twist it around, act like I had somehow pushed her into Jason's arms. I had seen that game played before. I wasn't going to be a part of it. Instead, I checked into a motel just outside the city, paid in cash, and locked the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, running through everything in my head. The betrayal, the humiliation, the way Jason had smirked at me like I was nothing. The more I thought about it, the clearer my next steps became. Jason hadn't just stolen my wife, he had stolen from my bar. From me. He had been skimming money for months, using me like I was some idiot who would never notice, and now he thought he was walking away clean. I wasn't going to let that happen. By morning, I had everything set in motion. First, I called my lawyer again. I had already started separating my finances from Emily's, but now I wanted it done immediately. No warning, no hesitation. By the time she woke up, her access to my accounts would be gone. The credit cards, the joint savings, everything. She would have exactly what she came into this marriage with. Nothing. Next, I called my accountant. I had spent weeks collecting proof of Jason's theft. Every missing dollar traced back to him. Now, I was ready to use it. I told my accountant to send the full report to the authorities. I didn't need to press charges myself. The state would take care of that once they saw the numbers. Jason thought he was untouchable, but the law wasn't going to see it that way. Then came the bar. I made a few calls, set up a meeting with the landlord. Jason had always talked about how he was the business, how I needed him to keep things running. But the truth was, he needed me. He needed my name on that lease, my reputation to keep customers coming back. Without me, he was nothing. And by the end of the day, his name would be wiped clean from everything. The final step was the one I had been waiting for, the one Jason and Emily wouldn't see coming. I called a few old friends, guys from the Corps, men who really knew how to handle problems. I wasn't looking for violence. I didn't need it. I just needed Jason to feel what it was like to have the walls close in, to have nowhere to run, to know that every choice he had made had led him to this. By the time I finally walked into the bar that evening, everything was already in motion. Jason was behind the counter, looking smug like nothing had happened. He thought he had won. He thought I had backed down. But the second he saw my face, his grin wavered. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, setting down the glass he was holding. "Thought you'd be licking your wounds somewhere." I didn't answer. I just walked past him, straight to the office, and pulled open the safe. He watched, confused, as I took out every last document with his name on it. His contract, his payroll records, every single piece of paper that tied him to this business. Then I turned and dropped them into the shredder, one by one. "What the hell are you doing?" he asked, his voice rising. "Cleaning house," I said calmly. He came around the counter, grabbing my arm. "You can't just—" I moved before he could finish. A simple step, a twist, and suddenly he was the one against the wall, my arm pressing against his throat. "You work here," I said, my voice low, steady. "But you don't own anything. And now, you don't even work here." I stepped back, letting him go. "You're fired, Jason. Get the hell out." He looked around like he expected someone to back him up, but the bar was silent. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone knew exactly what kind of man he was. "You can't do this," he said, breathless. "I already did." And then, as if on cue, the door swung open and two officers stepped inside. Jason turned, his face going pale as they walked straight toward him. "Jason Carter," one of them said, pulling out a folder. "We need to talk to you about some financial discrepancies." I leaned against the counter, watching as the reality of the situation finally hit him. He looked at me, eyes wild with desperation. "You set me up!" I smiled. "No, Jason, you set yourself up. I just made sure you got exactly what you deserved." And with that I turned away, letting the officers do their job. Jason had spent months thinking he was getting away with everything. Now he was going to learn what it felt like to have his world ripped apart, piece by piece, just like he had done to me. Jason was still shouting as the officers led him out of the bar. His voice was raw, filled with rage, disbelief, and that last desperate denial of a man who thought he would never face consequences. He threw every insult he could at me, at the cops, at the customers who stood watching in stunned silence. But the words didn't carry any weight. Nobody in that room felt sorry for him. Nobody was stepping forward to defend him. The moment the footage played on those screens, his fate was sealed. Everyone saw him for what he really was: a liar, a thief, a traitor. The doors swung shut behind him, and for the first time in a long time, the bar was mine again. I stood there for a moment, letting the noise settle, letting the tension ease. The weight of the past few weeks was still pressing down on me, but it felt different now, lighter, like I had finally ripped off a bandage that had been clinging to my skin for too long. I turned back toward the counter. Mike was standing there, his expression cautious, like he wasn't sure if I was about to explode or collapse. I exhaled slowly, ran a hand through my hair, and gave him a nod. "Get everyone around. On the house." The bar erupted into murmurs, then cheers, glasses clinking as people turned back to their drinks. That was all they needed, a signal that it was over, that they didn't have to walk on eggshells around me. No one asked questions. They didn't need to. They had already seen enough, and that was fine by me. I stayed for a while, long enough to make sure things were running smoothly, long enough to remind myself that this place was mine again. No more Jason, no more stolen money, no more whispered conversations behind my back, no more fake smiles while he stabbed me in the ribs. Just me, my bar, and the people who actually gave a damn. But there was still one thing left to deal with. Emily. I knew she was waiting for me before I even pulled into the driveway. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the living room lamp. She hadn't gone to bed. She had been sitting there for hours, waiting, wondering what I would do. She was probably replaying everything in her head, rehearsing her words, preparing for whatever version of this conversation she thought would make me stay. Maybe she thought she could fix this. Maybe she thought I would be like Jason's wife, the kind of man who would swallow his pride and let himself be walked over. She didn't know me at all. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. She was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face streaked with dried tears. The moment she saw me, her lips parted, like she was afraid to breathe too loudly. For a second, I saw something flicker in her expression. Relief. Like she had convinced herself that if I came home, it meant there was still a chance. I killed that hope with a single word. Her whole body flinched, as if I had struck her. I didn't stop. I walked past her, straight to the bedroom, grabbed the bag I had packed earlier. I didn't need much, just a few things to get me through the next few nights. Enough to remind her that this wasn't a temporary cooling-off period. This wasn't me storming out in anger only to come crawling back. This was me leaving. When I came back out, she was standing now, arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if she could hold herself together with sheer force of will. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Please," she whispered, "just talk to me." I should have felt something then. Maybe anger, maybe sadness, maybe some deep buried part of me should have wanted to hear her out, to give her a chance to explain. But I felt nothing. No pain, no regret. Just exhaustion. "Talk to you?" My voice was steady, calm. "About what? About how you spent months lying to my face? Sneaking around with Jason like I was too stupid to figure it out?" I let out a hollow laugh. "The whole damn bar saw the footage, Emily. Do you really think there's anything left to say?" Tears welled up in her eyes, her hands gripping the fabric of her sweater like she was trying to anchor herself. "I made a mistake." I shook my head. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is saying the wrong thing in an argument. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, over and over again. She took a hesitant step forward, her voice trembling. "I love you." I studied her face, searching for something real, something honest. But all I saw was desperation. She didn't love me. She loved the life I gave her. She loved the security, the comfort, the certainty that no matter what, I would always be there. "If you really loved me," I said quietly, "this never would have happened." She let out a choked sob, covering her mouth with her hand. She knew I was right. I turned toward the door, my grip tightening on my bag. "I already talked to the lawyer. The divorce papers will be here in a few days. You'll sign them." Her breath hitched. "And if I don't?" I finally looked at her, my expression unreadable. "You will." Then I walked out. The night air was crisp, cold against my skin, but for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs, letting the weight of everything finally start to lift. The bar was mine again. My life was mine again. And no matter how much it hurt to get here, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't walking away broken. I was walking away free.